Okay, so let's begin by introducing our speakers. Okay, so I think Tristram can start.
Hi, everybody. This is Tristram. I've been working in healthcare IT now for almost 20 years. I'm working specifically with cybersecurity for almost 12. And I've been happily serving the OffSec community now for about 6 years, 5, 6 years now.
Okay, thank you for that, Tristram. Now let's have Shadow Can.
Hey, I'm Shadow Khan. I've been a pen tester for about 10 years now. Really was my first job, just moved straight into pen testing. And then from there, just been, doing as much as I can in the security field. And I've been with the OffSec community as a moderator for over 2, 3 years now.
Yes, thank you. Let's have Contra.
Good morning. My name is Contra. I've been in the information security field for the past 16 years, largely on the defensive side, but just in the last 2 years, been on the red team. I am also a former employee of offensive security, and I'm one of the dedicated authors of SOC 200.
Wow.
That is all.
Okay, now let's have Sailin.
Hi, everyone. I've been working in the IT field for about 12 years as a whole. Five of those, I'd say, are spent in information security. Also, mostly on the defensive side, but have always had a strong interest in the offensive side. Been a community moderator now for almost a year, and I've been in the OffSec community for off and on for, I'd say, maybe the last 3 or 4 years. So that's basically where I'm at there.
Okay, thank you. Now let's have Omega.
Hi guys. I've been in IT in general for a solid 20 years. I am actually not currently working in directly with information security, but I am currently a senior level developer for the defense sector, and security concerns are paramount in the code that I write.
All right, so I think that's all of our community moderators have already introduced themselves. So let's begin. Okay, so to start, let's talk about the nature of stress in cybersecurity. Like, can each of you describe the main sources of stress in your specific roles within the field? Okay, so we can start with Tristram again. Let's just follow the order.
At least on my side of the house, so I work primarily with defensive security, as I mentioned before, with healthcare. So one of the things that's very difficult, and honestly, it should across almost every critical industry, is what happens when something bad happens to the environment that you're charged with protecting. So you always have to wonder, is like, what if I go to bed one night, everything is fine, and I wake up and my organization's been breached? It's always a real fear, and it's always a real stress that you're never doing enough. So sometimes it's very common for folks on the defensive side of things to overwork themselves because they know the threat landscape is always evolving, always changing. There's people like Shadowcon everywhere you go. So you have to put in, you feel like you have to put in that much extra effort to ensure that nothing bad happens. But the reality is that you can't prevent everything bad from happening. And that's usually a lesson that takes folks a very long time to learn. I mean, again, I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and I still feel like I haven't quite learned that lesson myself.
Okay, so how about you, Shadowcan?
I mean, I'm a consultant, so my sources of stress aren't necessarily the work and the jobs that I do. They usually come from client requirements or deadlines, things of that nature. A lot of what I do is very time dependent. Certain work has to get done within a certain time frame. Oftentimes that means, dealing with demanding clients or frustrating situations in certain ways. The work itself, I mean, I happen to be very fortunate that I really enjoy what I do. Hands-on keyboard work is a lot of fun for me, so that doesn't stress me out so much. More the fact that, at the end of every engagement, there has to be a report written, and at the same time, you're dealing with clients who have, issues remediating vulnerabilities from other engagements that, I've run or other scenarios where clients are asking for unreasonable things. I mean, I guess the joke would be that the work would be so easy if it wasn't for the darn customers, but mostly the source of stress would be dealing with client requirements, I would say.
Okay. Okay. All right, so Contra, yeah. So I think this conversation is really helpful to everyone since most of our community moderators are from different roles in cybersecurity field. So, anyone has their input on this topic. Yeah, so let's go ahead with Contra.
Thank you. I'm glad that Tristram brought up the actual hands-on dirty work that must be done and whether or not it's enough. I'm glad that Shadow Khan brought up the processional details of the job in terms of setting up deadlines and making sure that the customer is properly identifying what they want done. What I wanted to bring up is sort of the career-based stress that gets created when either you're concerned about where you are and what direction you might be heading in your career, but there's also external factors like layoffs in the tech industry and how the job market looks. And if you are seeking a job, the amount of time it takes just to get your foot in the door to have an interview, just to find out weeks later that you weren't selected for a role. So, in addition to what's been mentioned already, I want to add the career growth and career pursuits as a source of stress in the cybersecurity, information security uh, profession, career, industry.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Contra. So let's have Salin.
So it's funny he mentions job market since I recently went through almost a 4 month period of unemployment, and I got lucky and was able to get in with an MSSP. So I basically work now as a SOC analyst. And I'd say in that particular role, the main source of stress is if you're given multiple clients, you're juggling multiple alerts and things that you have to be looking at and investigating. If you're given one specific client because you're dedicated based off the contract that they have, um, it's not quite as bad, but uh, you still you still are kept up at night by the what if the organization gets breached. And that actually happened last month. I got to work through an incident where the Akira group managed to find their way in and make their way off with some data, and it wasn't the most ideal situation. I'd say as a whole, over a period of about 4 days, over 3,600 man hours were put in. And that was to get the organization operational enough by Monday. They weren't fully operational, but they were at least able to run. So, on a terms of, I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, the criticality was, I'd say, about an 8. It could have been very catastrophic had not there, had the backups not been there and had been in place. So there's all kinds of stress, and I'd say the most important thing is don't skip out on sleep. Please pay attention to your personal health. Try and do some physical activities outside of your job and learning. Super super important, especially especially if you ever are working a defensive role and actually find yourself working an incident.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Let's have Omega.
So, my fellow moderators have touched on a number of really important topics, but there's an elephant in the room that they've all kind of danced around. Imposter syndrome can be a huge stressor, even though it's coming from inside of you. Getting into a position doesn't mean that the stress of that position disappears. Are you performing well enough? Are you coming up to speed fast enough? Are you feeling like you need to measure yourself up against your peers because, hey, there might be cuts later and I need to not be the low dog on the totem pole? All of these things can add a tremendous amount of stress to your life. And it's important to understand that you're not alone in feeling like that, and that there are, I'll say, healthier ways to have self-measurement and self-worth in your job role than to just try and hold yourself up against somebody else as an arbitrary measuring stick. So yeah, that's definitely one that I encounter quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Hearing those sources of stress in this field, we can really realize that some of us, realizes that we experience already those things and we just, don't recognize it, that it's already, you know, resulting or adding up to our stress. Yeah, so there are a lot of things, yes, maybe not just in cybersecurity field, but also in other industry that we're working. There's a lot of sources can really, add up to stress, to our personal stress. We also have this professional stress. So I think good stress management will really help us also excel, not just personally, but also professionally. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing those, input or insights on that one. Okay, so how do these stressors differ from those in other tech sectors? If you have, experience working in different industry or a different sector, so how do those stressors differ?
I think it's fair to say that everybody is really going to experience stress
Mhm.
equally. I mean, we're all humans. We all have emotions. We all want to do the best job we can, and we all get upset when we don't necessarily get what we want, whether it's a career progression, monetary gain, or even just overall success. We all feel the impacts of stress. So I think really no matter where you go, it's always going to be there. And that's why having focus on your mental health, your personal health, your physical and emotional health is so
Mhm.
critical because no matter where you go, stress is going to be there.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the things I think about with stress is that it's sort of like a pressure cooker that as you recognize stress, saying that you'll deal with it later and then not dealing with it ends up making it a lot worse. It's one of those things that as you allow it to build up, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So two things may stress you out a little bit, but both of them in tandem will cause a lot more damage than if each one of them was handled alone. So I believe that while stress is definitely going to always be there, it's really a question of how you want to prioritize dealing with it and understanding that the more you wait to deal with it, the worse it can get, and having an understanding of yourself and what your limits are and using that to inform your movements moving forward also is helpful.
Definitely ties in together with the importance of physical activity. It's a great way to just release negative energy, and that usually comes in the form of stress. And yeah, it's not good to let it fester and build up, because in the long term, it can lead you into indulging in unhealthy habits, and it is linked to you know making you prone to getting sick. You're more likely to get sick down the line if you're constantly stressed.
I mean, for me personally, my stress level goes up and down, usually with the requirements that are being placed upon me. Whenever I've been either shallow in a role, meaning there's, either just myself or maybe just a couple other people, and, we've got a significant responsibility, it's it's a lot more than if I'm in a larger team. That having been said, you have the most impact when you're the man on the spot. Um, it can definitely be a um, a chance for personal growth, even a chance to shine. But there's a reason that folks that have really high pressure jobs have a tendency to try and draw a line between their home life and their professional life, because if they take it home with them, they know it's going to eat them alive.
The question was, one of the questions asked was, how does a stressor in the cybersecurity field different from other fields? When I heard that, my instinct was to say that, or my instinct was to respond with a lot of the stress in this field comes from a feeling of powerlessness. It is not the exclusive contributing factor, but it is a prominent one. We're all in this industry to make it better, not worse. We want to contribute. We're pack animals. We want to be together, make something better than it was before we showed up, whether it be on the offensive side or on the defensive side. But if you take away our ability to do that or minimize it or make it seem less important than other facets of the business, that powerlessness can cause a lot of stress. It can infuriate, it can make us sad, it can make us lash out. So that it's a little different in than other industries where I think there's a greater degree of autonomy or there's something different altogether, like life threatening situations. But powerlessness, I think, is a big part of the stressor in the information security industry.
I definitely have to echo pretty much everything you just said there. Like probably one of the biggest challenges that I face in my role is when we implement security controls, we know that they're there for good reasons. We know that they're going to help the organization as a whole. But just because we recommend a security change, it doesn't mean that it's going to be welcomed with open arms. There's going to be pushback from all ends of life for things that you do here. So whether it's IT pushback or end user pushback, for me, medical staff are usually the targets to most of our security controls. So when you want to implement something that you know is going to protect them from themselves and protect the organization, but there's so much pushback that it just doesn't happen. You feel that sense of powerlessness. You feel defeated because you have this thing that you know is going to be good, but people just don't see it that way. So then that's when the imposter syndrome that Omega brought up comes into place as well, is because you think, are my ideas not good? And that's, again, that's a lesson that's learned in time where you have to acknowledge that there are going to be times where you're going to be defeated, but how you respond to that defeat is going to be critical. You don't want to just give up and then go do something else. You just have to learn to either pull yourself up from the bootstraps and come at the problem from a different angle.
I also want to add on to what Tristram was saying, that a lot of the decisions in the cybersecurity world are made by people that don't necessarily have as broad or as deep an understanding as those who are giving the advice. And oftentimes there's going to be a conflict between the decision makers and the advice givers. And what ends up happening is that things that make perfect sense from a security standpoint, for better or for worse, don't make as much sense from a business standpoint, and the decision gets waylaid or pushed aside or even ignored. And that's a source of stress for, people on the blue team who don't understand why 2FA isn't going to be enabled, and people on the delivering side who are understanding that, adding in 2FA will add on another hour and a half to their day as they deal with the various prompts that they have to navigate into different things. And it's just doesn't not feasible for a business standpoint. They have to have some sort of reconciliation. But there is some sort of understanding that stress also comes from people not fully being aware of the different sides and not necessarily considering, all the different points that need to be considered before a decision is made. And this goes for the decision makers as well, where they don't fully consider these security implications before they completely ignore a suggestion, and that leads to stress as well, especially for the blue team.
Yeah, I'd like to bounce off of that too, just by adding that if you're a really technical person and that's basically been your passion throughout IT and security, um, you're going to have to learn how to put that aside when you're stepping into especially a defensive security role. And you need to take some time to learn a little bit about the business that you're, being tasked with helping secure. Um, this can be difficult for some people because it really forces you to change the way you think. You're going to have to change your perspective a little bit. But one of the pieces of literature that actually helped me with this, it's fictional. Maybe some of y'all have heard of it, the Phoenix Project. I found the ending of it to be a bit unrealistic, but I think the important lesson that I took away from it was just the different perspective and the different problems and challenges that upper management all the way up to the CEO level have to deal with. Things that you may not have ever thought about or considered because you've never been in that position. So that can definitely help. But once you have a better understanding of the business, you will be a little bit more confident in deciding how to choose your battles. Because, like Tristan was saying, this is you're not always going to win. And one of the ways you can help overcome, feeling like you're so defeated is that, okay, well, we didn't win this one, but we were able to get our point across and sell the business value on these other items. So, hey, that's progress. So I thought that's super important for also kind of helping deal with some of the stress that comes from the challenges that you deal with.
And just to kind of bounce off all of that, there is a assumption, and it tends to be a very baseline assumption for a lot of us that work in very technical fields, that the people who are above us because they're better, more experienced, or more knowledgeable in our jobs than we are. Hey, I don't expect my junior assessors to be as experienced as my, principals. But by the same method, when you start getting into management, when you start getting into executive roles, they're coming up an entirely different vertical from you. And they're not necessarily technical people at all. So when you tell them something, when you make a recommendation and say, this is a problem and this is the solution, and yes, it's going to have X amount of business disruption, but we can mitigate in these ways, you may think that you're taking everything into consideration and, being conscientious of the business. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to make the call. And so you need to put it in not just business terms, but human relatable terms. If all I do is, drop CVE numbers and expect them to, do what we might do and look that up and understand what that vulnerability is and do a little homework. No, there's not even a C-level executive in the world that's going to go do that for you. You need to explain at a very high level why this matters and, what the potential impacts are. The other thing is that whether you're offensive or defensive side of things, at the end of the day, we are selling security. We are selling or adding value to the business as effectively insurance. We are trying to mitigate a risk. And we will never be an obvious good expenditure of funds and business resources unless and until we suddenly became necessary. And the only way we become necessary is if bad things happen. And that's a hard thing to get across to executives at times. And just being aware of that and understanding that no matter how perfect your presentation and how necessary your remediation recommendations may be, at the end of the day, you're not necessarily going to have a technical person making the call and pulling the trigger on that. And that doesn't mean that you were bad in how you pulled it together. It doesn't mean that you were unprepared in how you laid everything out. It just may mean that you have an executive that's not interested in investing in, in that security, in that that insurance for the business. And sometimes that's a business level decision, and sometimes that's simply an ignorance level decision. But that doesn't mean that you have failed, so long as you are trying to do your very best for the business.
Right.
Different executives have different appetites for risk. And like you said, just try and get that 35,000 foot view of the business and all the moving parts. And if you can learn to shape your requests in the terms of dollar value, money, money saved, that kind of thing, or that you're much more likely to get your wins. Then yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for those, insightful. I know that you have also shared tips on how to address those stressors that you have mentioned earlier. Okay, so I know that our viewers have learned a lot from this session. Yeah. Okay, so could you also please share personal experiences where stress significantly impacted your work or personal life?
This kind of what I mentioned in the beginning was that fear of that you're not doing enough. So when I was very green as a blue teamer, one of the first things that I did wrong was I worked too much. I would do my 8 to 4. I would go drive home. I'd eat my dinner, and I would VPN in, and I would start working until midnight. I would never learn how to step away, and that obviously makes things difficult when you're going through college, you're starting a family, you got kids, you start losing sleep. And that's probably one of the worst things too, is you gotta watch your sleep. You can't lose sleep. So learning not to stepping away isn't a bad thing, because you have to remember that yes, you're providing a service, but you also have a life to live. So you got to understand that there is a time where you need to work. There's a time for you to enjoy your life and your family and your friends. So definitely for me, it was putting in too much time that for one wasn't being compensated, and I just wasn't getting anything out of it. And then the reality was the organization wasn't more secure because I was working around the clock. That wasn't the case at all. I felt like I was, but again, that's a lesson that took me a long time to learn.
I think the biggest source of stress for me in my career or personal life would be placing too much importance on the job. For an example, in the beginning of my career, when I still felt like this before I learned how to deal with it, I would give the job much more importance than it actually merited. And as a result, I would stress out, making sure that everything was great and everything was perfect and, doing the absolute best I could or spending extra hours or extra time, ultimately understanding that it's just a job and, you do the best you can, but there's no call to lose sleep or do anything else with it is very helpful. And understanding that while you do the best you can, because that's your responsibility, not everything is within your control, and there's no reason to allow it to affect you in any way.
What affects me most is prioritization. That is what I think is important in terms of my role as a security professional does not mesh with other engineers outside of security that do not have the same level of experience or appreciation for the risks and vulnerabilities that are present in their systems. What they consider to be an acceptable risk, I find to be very hard to accept. And it's sort of like when you see somebody who's literally on fire and you tell them they should put the fire out, and they're saying, why? It's cold. It's cold outside. Being on fire is what I want. And you know for a fact that they don't want to be on fire, but their priority is simply different from yours, and that can be infuriating and cause stress.
So,
I'm
oh,
nope,
sorry.
sorry.
Um,
Nope,
I'd say for me, sometimes one of the things where I'll slip up if the stress gets to me is I'll end up overeating. So that's kind of a problem because I do try to watch my weight and sleep too. That's another thing really important not to lose a lot of sleep. When I was working the incident, I consider myself fortunate to have bosses and a director who absolutely insisted that after having been on a call for basically 16 hours, they said go to sleep, get sleep. They had nighttime coverage, so if you're fortunate enough to land in an environment like that, take appreciate that they're considering your health and well-being, and do your best to take care of that kind of job if you land in.
So to kind of bounce off several of what my contemporaries have said, I have had a lot of jobs over the years where uh, either there was no guidance for work-life balance, or um, there was pressure to have an unhealthy. And my imposter syndrome has always been very real. Um, and I've oftentimes compensated by that, kind of like what Tristram was talking about in putting in extra hours. Am I expected to be on the clock right now? No, I'm not getting paid anything extra. In some cases, I was actively in violation of corporate policy for putting in extra hours, but I felt like I needed to because, that was how I was going to prove my worth. That was how I was going to demonstrate value to the organization. And in one notable occasion, it actually cost me the job. But even when you're doing that, you compromise yourself, not just necessarily your employment, but also your performance. Would you rather be at peak performance and able to, most readily spot things and fix problems and, exploit a vulnerability because you noticed it? Or would you rather be walking through like a zombie and, you're effectively about as useful as a Nessus scan? Is this helpful? Well, yeah, you have enough zombies banging away at enough keyboards and you'll write Shakespeare. That having been said, it's not likely. And you are more useful as a fully functional individual than someone who has just baked their brain trying to put in too many hours, compromising sleep, compromising health because you're eating poorly. All of these little things stack up and all of them have detrimental effects on your performance. If you want to perform well, you need to take care of yourself. You are a machine. In many ways, you are a machine. You're a biological machine. And that means you need maintenance. And that means you need downtime. And recognizing that and making that a priority so that, okay, we missed the mark today, but I guarantee you, if I put in another 8 hours tonight and am just fried tomorrow, I'm not going to make it any better. I need to go home. I need to reset and I need to come at this with fresh eyes. Anyone who's been through an OffSec exam knows that time crunch pressure, but also those who have been successful have recognized that it's better to take a breather, go for a walk, take a nap, and come back at it as, a peak individual, not as someone who is just trying to bash their head through it, because that doesn't solve anything.
So much of what you're all saying, it's so close to home. I feel like this is an intervention for Tristram.
You are not alone, my friend. I promise. Now get down here and eat barbecue.
I'm really here to just round out the numbers.
But yeah, no, it really is true. Like I've been off and on with diet and fitness long enough that there is a noticeable difference in my energy levels and my ability to focus and problem solve when I'm eating good and I'm taking care of myself. Whereas if I'm not taking care of myself, if my sleep is garbage, if I'm eating like garbage, yeah, I tire out easily. I get that brain fog, that fatigue. It's hard to focus. I'm not very productive. Omega is right. You are a machine.
And another part of that machine is the mental component. And that means that no matter how bad things are, Tristram walks in in the morning, and the entire hospital chain has been breached. They took everything. All the equipment is down. Everything is on fire. Oh my God, what the hell? Oh, wait. Is it going to help him to panic and run around like his hair's on fire? Or is it going to help him to stop, take a breath, and then proceed calmly and efficiently? Nobody benefits from panic, but it's really easy to do.
No, that's absolutely right. And I've trained now. Oh goodness, I think I've had probably 100 interns now at this point, and I always train them on incident response. And one of those first things I always do to them is I use the analogy of just throwing them in the middle of a lake and to teach them to swim. Like again, when you were dealing with an incident, you can't panic because you're gonna miss so many easy wins when you're during your assessment. And the same thing goes with OffSec exams. People panic and they get into these and they get into these rabbit holes because they're not thinking clearly. Because when panic mode sets in, there are parts of your brain that are turning on and off that you don't even realize is happening. So knowing how to stay calm and stay on target is going to be so critical.
Yep. I mean, panic stimulates adrenaline output. Adrenaline stimulates fight or flight responses, and it benefits both of them really, really well. But we're not in an industry or even related to any industry where fighting or running away is going to benefit us. We need to stop and we need to think and we need to use our intelligence as opposed to our fists or our legs. And that's not something adrenaline helps with. So if you can train yourself to stop, take a breath, and push down that panic and proceed calmly, it will change everything about how effective you are, whether you're acting as a paramedic or whether you're acting as a blue teamer.
We have a blog post that's coming out soonish. But if you, one thing I would recommend everybody to look into is this Google the triune brain theory. That's something that I hold very near and dear. If you go through that, understand what it is, it's going to help you so much with dealing with stress in this industry. It's going to help you deal with human emotions, not only just yours, but those of those who are around you. And it's just an overall recommendation I'll get everybody.
Yes. So I agree that that blog post is, you know, is really great. Yeah, so I have already read the draft of it, and yes, thank you, Tristram, for creating it, for writing it, and yes, it will be soon published by OffSec. Yes, in our website. Yeah. Okay. So, in your own opinion, I would also like to ask if how can organizations support their employees in managing stress, or and what role do managers and leaders play in fostering a supportive environment? Since I believe, you know, some of you here is already in the leadership team, so you can also share your insights on, you know, what role do managers and leaders?
Well, having
I can tell you
managers
where
and
that
leaders,
starts.
go for it.
You sure, buddy? Floor is yours. I'll go right after you.
No, all yours. I think you and I are probably going to say the same exact thing, so that's why we both jumped on it.
I'll take that
Go
bet.
for it.
All right. So again, there's a possibility that Tristram and I will say the same thing. The fact is, if you're a manager, if you are a leader, or some combination of the both, you need to shepherd, protect your subordinates. You need to make sure that they still have the power to feel like they're making a difference. They have power and autonomy to do the work. Let them know that they are making a difference and make sure they stay on track with doing things that the organization benefits from. At the same time, you protect them from a lot of the bureaucratic difficulties that tend to chip away at somebody's patience. You provide that top cover because in this industry, there's a lot of random tasks that trail down to the subordinates, and it really gets in the way of them doing what they do best. So you protect them from that, but you also um, give them the resources that they need, whether they be professional ones or interpersonal ones, to just go forth and do good things for the company and help it grow. Protect them, enable them. That is what you should be doing as a leader and as a manager, or some combination thereof. That's my personal take. Tristram, you're up.
That you're pretty much not word for it, but the point is still there. It really comes down to leaders have to take ownership of ensuring that there is some type of a work-life balance with your staff, especially when you're on the blue team. It's very common for you to think that you're constantly running into an array of arrows being shot at you. And as a leader, you have to either teach them to walk in the other direction when they need to, or act as a shield. So you talked about the covering them from all the bureaucratic garbage that comes with their jobs. Like, leaders need to intervene for folks. They need to shepherd them. They need to know if somebody is going through a challenging incident investigation or even a challenging time in their personal life, they should know okay, maybe Tristan is having XYZ issue. Maybe I shouldn't have him deal with this high priority ticket. Maybe I should give it to somebody else. They should be doing stuff like that. And at the same time, when you're dealing with work drama as a leader, you should acknowledge that and either try to step in to de-escalate or wait or help them guide them towards a peaceful resolution. A lot of times I've seen a lot of leaders fail because they don't lead. They're just there because they're just disseminating work and then they're off to the races. But we have to be actively involved in our subordinates' lives. We have to understand what they're going through. Are they having a good time? Are they having a bad time? If they're not having a good time, then we should be having sit downs with them and ask them, what can I do to make your life here and even your personal life in some cases better? We have to be asking those questions because a lot of leaders will wait for the subordinate to go to them with problems. And in my own 2 cents is if you're waiting for your subordinate to come to you, then you've already failed. Because most of the time, especially with security, is everybody is so involved with everything that you know if somebody's having a bad time, you should be able to that's what I'm looking for. You should be able to at least recognize when somebody is struggling, and then you should be taking the initiative to start the discussion. So, but yes,
In fact, why not set up? Sorry, I just wanted to fit in like, if you want a good idea, have like a 2 week a meeting every 2 weeks with your subordinates, maybe every week if time permits, just to get a pulse check on them, and then you'll avoid being that failure that Tristram just described. All right, I'm done talking.
I am a big fan of having check-ins like that outside of work, whether it's getting pancakes for breakfast or having pizza for lunch or something. An area where somebody's going to feel safe and feel comfortable talking. Most of the time, people won't feel comfortable talking in a work setting. So if you're in a leadership position, you have subordinates that you truthfully care about. Again, go buy them breakfast, go do something, get them a coffee, do something outside of work, go for a walk. Like take the extra effort to show that you give a crap.
I also want to add in that while managers and bosses do have responsibility, um, there's also this idea that the employee is responsible for themselves as well. The employee should be aware of what their limits are and be aware of what the corporate or regular work resources or even interpersonal resources that are available to them are. And they should make a point of when necessary, not be afraid to seek help. I mean, if they need extra support or if they need extra time or if they need extra anything, the first step is to recognize and the second step is to ask. And if you're unable to recognize it within yourself, then ultimately it may be harder for others to recognize it as well and help you out. And then it'll pile on. Then you reach the pressure cooker scenario that I described earlier. Being aware of yourself and when you need to make changes is a huge part of dealing with stress as well. Because if there's a stress, that means that things are not continuing as planned and they shouldn't continue as planned and something needs to change. So making that change is going to be integral to dealing with the stress, and being aware of what change needs to be made is part of that and how to make it as well.
I'd even jump on and say that, while it's very good, as a team member to be aware of what's available to you and, not just your own specialty, but also the specialties of the other members of your team. But if you are a team leader, if you are a manager, if you are a supervisor, then it's not just the employee's responsibility for that. You are responsible for the team as a whole. And that means to get peak performance out of them, you need to be aware of what each member of your team is working on, not micromanaging them. You need to give them the autonomy to do their job and be good at it, but at least be aware of what they're doing. And, likewise, be aware of how that fits into the bigger picture. Your job as a manager, as a leader, is not to be necessarily, the line infantry member, holding this position. Your job is to coordinate them. Your job is to turn them from individual soldiers into a cohesive force. And to take it out of military terms, if I have a team that works well together, and I know that ShadowCon is hell on wheels for AD, and I know that Tristram is amazing when it comes to log analysis. If I've got a project and I need these particular things worked on, I may not necessarily have Tristram doing the log analysis. Maybe I have ShadowCon doing it, but I have Tristram shadowing him, and I have him helping him learn and get better. Managing and developing your team is the job of a manager. If that wasn't the case, if we just needed to have the best people all working away, we wouldn't need management. Everybody would just be line infantry. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. There are a lot of professional attributes that the managers should have to also, check on their team, and help them, guide them. Sometimes we just, don't assist them in work related matters. Sometimes we have to wear a hat that we can support them, or we can um have them, be honest with us with their personal struggles, right? Their stress, it could be work related or personal. Yeah, so um, those stuff, I can really relate to that, since I have worked as a team lead. Yeah, so most of my team members, they really share their personal struggles with me, because it can really affect their productivity and performance at work. Yeah, so what happened is that they commit a lot of errors or mistakes, and then that's the time we do coaching, right? So we talked about like what caused this. So there's this root cause analysis, which will happen during the discussion. So we really have to identify what really caused the performance, and then it will lead us to this discussion about their personal struggle. So we have, as a leader, you have to wear different hats. It depends on every individual that you're communicating and the situation. Sometimes I need to wear my team lead hat, sometimes a listener, or like just a friend. Yes, so like encouraging them. Yeah, so a lot of happening during the coaching session. Yes, it could be quality coaching, or just plain talking or chatting about personal goals or professional goals. Yes, those stuff. So it can really help the one-on-one session. And I really agree on that. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much. This is really a productive live session. Yeah. So let's talk about now work-life balance. So what does work-life balance mean to you, especially in the context of cybersecurity, and how has your perception of it evolved over your career?
For me, I don't really feel I have a work-life balance unless I know that I can leave at the end of the day and do something completely not work related. One thing that not everybody knows is that I do taxidermy on the side. I'm also a fur trapper, and I delve in fur auctions as well. So knowing that I have a hobby outside of my career path helps me with my work life balance, because again, I have the ability to walk away from work stress. And that's one thing I would definitely recommend folks do, is that if you don't have a hobby, or you don't have one that you actively maintain, try to find something, whether it's going to the gym, going for a walk, some type of sport. If you feel like you can't turn off your brain to work stuff because that's the only thing on your mind, then that's a sign that you need to find something else to fill in your free time with. I also have 3 children, so that they keep me very busy on top of everything else. And you got to have that separation, not only for you, but for your loved ones as well.
From
This is
my
something you can. No, go ahead. Why don't you take this?
Sorry, I was just following our usual pattern of going after Tristram. But so yeah, as one of the people who constantly bother other people for wolf rugs, Tristram is definitely on my hit list based on his
Uh-oh.
fur his fur thing in taxidermy. But as an aside, as far as work-life balance goes, so I work from home and my play computer is literally right next to my work computer. And I would say that I come from a slightly different perspective from Tristram. That obviously hobbies are good. I do work out every single day and I do other things outside of my technical life, but I just want to point out that it's a good idea to ensure that if you're working in an IT field, that the computer shouldn't be a source of stress for you, meaning that the computer shouldn't be the thing that you use only to do work or on your job, because then it becomes something that you get an aversion to, similar to Pavlov's dog, where every time you sit down at your computer, you're just going to get stressed because you're sitting down to work. So one of the things that I make sure to do is that I will always use a computer or a technical thing, a phone, a computer, my work computer, whatever it may be, to do things that I enjoy as well. Watch a movie, play a game, read something, whatever it may be. I'll make sure that the technology itself is not something that gives me stress so that I don't have an aversion to technology. And I make sure that I continuously enjoy what I'm doing, and the computer itself is not something that I hesitate to sit down in front of because, I want to keep enjoying what I do and I don't want to turn this into, the bell that rings to give me stress. I want to make sure that I, enjoy sitting down in my chair every day.
One thing that can help with work-life balance is probably making sure you're having the conversation with your manager, because you may have an idea of what you'd like to do for work-life balance if you're following the advice of the two people that preceded me, but you want to make sure that your manager is aware of it so they don't think you're just avoiding the workplace or being unresponsive. If you set sort of like guidelines as to what you plan on doing for work-life balance, get their take on it, you'll get buy-in from them, and that'll ensure that whatever it is you want to do to decompress, to de-stress, you have managerial support, and that will go a long way to make sure that your de-stressing moments, your decompression moments go uninterrupted.
I've had a lot of success in relying on my fiance to help me de-stress. In the past, before we were together, um, I tried going to a manager and asked what the expected work-life balance looked like for the company, and was literally given a poker face and asked what I thought it should be, and no further guidance. And so I worked 14-hour days and, just barely went home to eat and then fall into bed. And it was not healthy. It was not good. And I, recognize where I am now later in my career that I was being taken advantage of on several levels by that company. That having been said, that comes with experience. If I had known my fiance at the time, she would have taken one look at that and gone, that's not okay. They pay you for 8 hours, you work your 8 hours, and then you come home and I feed you because that's how I can contribute and help support you. And that was huge for me when I realized that it wasn't all on me. It imposter syndrome or not, I am not Superman. It doesn't have to all be by my hand. And recognizing and accepting that made a huge, huge difference in my work-life balance. Because like I said, I did try and compensate my, imposter syndrome by putting in extra hours, and that destroyed that work-life balance. As far as hobbies, I work on a computer and I spend most of my free time playing on a computer. So, there's never a time when I dread sitting down in my chair. There are times I dread a particular project or a timeline that I'm working under, but I'm lucky enough that my personal interest in like Forex strategy games, there's always something new, whether it's a new game or a DLC or something that helps me, have something to look forward to at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, I close my laptop, I go home, and I get to do things that I enjoy, or at the very least, things that give me satisfaction. I don't necessarily enjoy mowing my lawn in triple digit heat, but it looks good and that gives me satisfaction. To each their own.
So I've kind of already talked about what I do in terms of my work life balance, as far as trying to pay attention to my physical health. So go to the gym, go for walks. But in terms of hobbies, what I would strongly recommend, especially if you spend a lot of time sitting in front of a computer, um, try and find a hobby that doesn't involve sitting in front of a keyboard. So uh, outside of the gym, something that not a lot of people know is that I also like to, you know, play around with gardening a little bit. I've been growing some vegetables in my backyard, got some watermelon, uh, and it's been great. It's kind of nice just to spend some time outside, not be in front of a screen, and because especially with the hot summers here, have to make sure they get watered at least 3 times a day. So it really helps just to, like Omega said, close your laptop, walk away from the keyboard, turn your brain off from work for a little while. You'd be amazed at how often it actually helps you find a solution to a problem when you come back and sit down and look at it later on.
Okay, so thank you for all your responses to that question. So at this time, I would like to ask if how do you set boundaries between work and personal life, particularly when dealing with urgent cybersecurity threats?
At least for my team, we have a rotating on call. We know, like for example, I'm the most senior member of our staff. Even if I'm not on call, I know I'm probably going to get pulled into most security incidents anyways. That's all right because we don't, knock on wood, we don't have many. Um, it's always good to set the expectations very early on with whomever your leadership is. Is incidents are different. If you work on a blue team and there is a major, not like a managed service provider, but let's say for example you're a blue team for a hospital. So let's use my example. If there is a security incident, there's almost an expectation that I need my team. We got to be there. Doesn't mean that we're going to work 24 hours a day, but there should be some expectation that you're going to be called upon and you're going to get compensated for it. Outside of security incidents like breaches, it's having like an on-call schedule and making sure that people actually contact the right on-call. So, for example, if you're somebody who always seems to get pulled into various service requests, don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm not currently on call. Can you contact this person? And they could be able to help you. And if you find that people keep trying to circumvent that an on-call process, that's when you should be letting your leader know, saying, hey, X, Y, and Z isn't following our procedures. I'm constantly getting contacted after hours when I shouldn't be. Can you please help? Again, that's another instance where your leader needs to kind of step up and help you there. But it's just to make sure that the expectations are set very early on when you would or would not be expected to work after your schedule shift. That way, there's no surprises.
So I guess in my case, with the on-calls, thankfully I don't do full-time incident response. The type of on-calls that we have is just mainly because there's different projects going on. There's at least one person who's designated on call during like day shifts, so it's not like I'm not like we have to do calls after hours unless it's an actual emergency. But that'll usually come down through our team lead, not through us as analysts directly. But uh, the benefit of that is by having a rotation of people who are looking at the different types of alerts that come from the different monitoring tools, it also benefits as a form of cross training as well, making sure that everyone on the team is familiar with the tools, familiar with the types of alerts that come in, uh, how to, having playbooks to handle most of them so that even if someone new comes on board, there's a step by step process on how to get it done. Um, kind of steers off of the on-call aspect of it, but it's just kind of one of those long-term things that can be achieved over time.
Okay, so what pieces of advice would you give to new professionals entering the cybersecurity field about managing stress and maintaining a work-life balance?
Kind of like what I
And
touched on before is set expectations, know what the priorities of the organization are, and make sure they align with yours. If you need help, ask for it. If your leader does not provide you the help that you're asking for, then you should probably either find a new leader or a new organization, and try to find a hobby or something that is completely unrelated to the work you do.
Yeah, that's basically what my advice would be as well for establishing that work-life balance. Taking care of yourself. The big three. Sleep, nutrition, and your personal fitness, and then yeah, having a hobby outside of tech.
So I've never had to worry about, which is why I didn't answer the previous question. I've never really had to worry about on call. If something was bad enough that I was getting paged, in the middle of the night or on a weekend, um, like legitimately the company was imploding. Kind of, there, there was no reason. I was never senior enough for that to be a concern, especially as a developer. No matter how security focused, my code never hits production unless it has been thoroughly vetted. So I've never had to deal with the incident response pager or something of that nature. Um, and just yeah, I I try and have a disconnect between my personal life and my work. That doesn't mean that the two don't have blending points. I'm friends with lots of folks from work. Um, I like to barbecue in my personal time. And it has been something that I have taken to work and been like, try this new sauce, new recipe, new rub, whatever. And I'm looking for opinions. And oh God, you would not believe the amount of goodwill that builds when you're working with a bunch of hard charging type A types. As far as getting into the field and trying to manage it, um, be aware of what is sane and safe for you. I I didn't know what the expectations were when I worked uh, early on, and so I asked. And when I was given nebulous non-answers, I just assumed that meant that it all had to be work, and home life was for quitters, and that's not healthy. And I didn't do as good a job as I could have if I had been better about balancing it, but that guidance wasn't there. And so I think the best advice I could give is be aware of how much you can give for yourself before you are literally burning yourself out, because burnout is again like imposter syndrome. It's a real thing, and it really does happen in every industry. If you can't look at the day that you spent at work and say, yep, my brain is tired, but I'm going to be at 100% again tomorrow because I'm going to have gotten enough rest. You can't honestly say that to yourself. You've given too much. You've put too much into this. And it doesn't matter if you worked 8 hours or if you worked 14. If you cannot recharge, you are cutting into what makes you you. If you want to put it in a math sense, your workday, you're spending your interest. If you cannot be recharged and have more interest to spend again the next day, you've given too much. You're digging into your principal, and before long, there's nothing left of you. And you were just, at that point, you're ineffective, and you're not happy, and it's just not worth it. I've been in situations where I have been literally starving before, and it's not fun, it's not good, but it's also, at least for me, it was a transient situation, and I have never encountered that while working in IT. And so, if you are literally at the point where you need to choose between, hey, do I put in a couple extra hours and get to eat tonight, or do I go home? That's a work-life balance of, hey, you're in a really terrible spot and need to figure out bigger things. As far as just the normal work-life balance, again, you can't destroy what makes you effective. You can't just spend your principal and leave nothing left, because it's not sustainable. And that's what we're all here for. We're here to have long, satisfying, healthy careers, not burn ourselves out and be a wreck.
Okay, so thank you for that, Omega. So do you have any final thought that you could share with our viewers before we conclude this session?
Your mental health matters. Take care of yourself.
Yes, it's super, super important. Your mental health is directly correlated to, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating the right kind of foods? Are you taking care of yourself physically and getting some form of exercise? If you're not doing these things, you're no good to anybody if you're ineffective and unable to function.
If you are not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, you are not doing proper maintenance. And like any machine, you are going to break down and suffer for it. And that can be very subtle. It can be a gradual thing. If I don't put oil in my car, I'm going to slowly degrade my engine, and I'm going to have reduced performance, and I'm going to lose gas mileage. And it's not going to be obvious until I hit a point of catastrophic failure where the entire engine seizes up and the entire thing is just shot and needs to be replaced. And that can be the case for non-visible aspects of self-care. If you are eating poorly and not exercising, you're probably going to gain weight. That's an easy and obvious one to see, even if it's happening over time. If you're not taking really good care of yourself, hygiene wise, you're going to look disheveled, and there's going to be people around you that will notice, even if they don't say anything. Self-care at every level is important. It's important for the maintenance of you as a employee. It's important for you as just a sane human being. It's important for the health of the organization, because, hey, you're not the only one who's there, and you reflect as part of the team. Even if you're, like me, the programmer in the corner in his little concrete box, not being exposed to the clients, that's not an isolated environment within the company. Other people see you, and other people think that you reflect on them just like they reflect on you, because you are part of a larger whole. And it's so important. It's so important not to let yourself get into a downward spiral, because like anybody who's had a progressive problem, kind of like Shadow Khan said very early on in this call, that if you have one little thing that's stressing you out, it's providing some amount of stress. If you have a second one, not only is it providing some amount of stress by itself, but it's bouncing off of the first one, and it's providing a compounded effect. If you can keep yourself on a level keel, give yourself self-care, don't see it as a luxury. You know, we're not talking about, hey, go out and spend, thousands of dollars going to the spa and getting, a mani-pedi and being, uh, uh, very chic about everything. I mean, if that's your thing, no judgment here, but it's not mine. And what I need in order to function my best is something that I have had to identify for myself and have make a point of being a priority for myself. I can't just not do that. I can't go back to being the guy who works 14 hours a day and has no life and still think that I'm performing at anything more than just, a monkey bashing at a keyboard. I've learned. And if I can impart any of that to somebody who's trying to get into the industry, it's worth it.
All right. Thank you so much for everyone, especially their amazing community moderators, for sharing their insights and experiences. Today, we discussed the main sources of stress in cybersecurity, effective stress management techniques, practical tips for achieving work-life balance, and the future of these crucial aspects in our industry. So, thank you, everyone, to to all of to all of our viewers here for attending and participating in this important conversation. We hope you found this session valuable and are leaving with plenty of actionable insights and takeaways to apply in your professional and personal lives. So, have a great day, everyone, and until our next OffSec Lab session.
Thanks for
Thanks
coming.
all.
Bye. Thank
Thank
you.
you.